Poke the Bear is brought to you by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network.
And welcome into Poke the Bear, episode 204, presented by CLNS Media and sponsored by our good friends over at FanDuel and Factor Meals. My name is Conor Ryan, and once again, we're riding solo today for this episode. And I think when we talk about the Bruins and how they've played as of late, they're kind of similar to how I'm feeling right now, which if you can't tell from the congestion, probably the multiple coughs you're going to hear on this podcast, feeling pretty crappy. And I think if you're a Bruins fan and you've watched this team over this extended homestand, probably say they're playing kind of a similar way, aren't they? Right? And you look at just, we're recording this Saturday night, so an up-to-date podcast by the time this one drops. Bruins have now lost 4 straight games at home, which is kind of hard to believe they've fallen into a rut like that. And 5 of 6. They had that one really good win against the Vancouver Canucks kind of sandwiched in between there, which made you feel like this team was going to kind of come out of this and out of this little rut they had. But they had that win. But in between that 4-game losing streak, you had that awful loss to the Calgary Flames. It feels like it's one of these games or one of these homestands where if you're a Bruins fan and you've gone to one of them, you feel bad for people who've like had to pay money for a couple of them. You look at like that Flames game, that Seattle Kraken game on Thursday, just low event hockey, nothing really going on, not a whole lot to show for it. And I think you look at this past game on Saturday against the Kings, 5-4 overtime loss. It's even more frustrating, right? Because I think Joe Montgomery said it best post-game. He said, quote, "That's a game we should win. The execution wasn't where it should be. Give them credit. They never stopped competing. That's what desperate teams do." And it's true. The Bruins just aren't really playing like a desperate team right now, where you've had multiple opportunities to really put that game away and just couldn't get the job done. You know, it's frustrating the fact that I think the Bruins, their previous 4 losses, had scored a whopping 4 goals. They finally get 4 goals in a game, and whether it's just the saves not being there, the penalties, the special teams play, this team just couldn't get out of its own way a lot of the times to lift themselves to a victory, which is very frustrating. And I think when you look at especially in this game, right, like you have the power play, which finally cashes in a little bit earlier on in the game. JVR has a really strong game, which was really encouraging. But this is still a power play that has been really out of whack the last couple of games. Extended drought that really, put them in a spot where they couldn't either extend leads, claw back into games. And then even in this game, yes, it's great. You get a few of the power play goals early on, but you get a power play opportunity in overtime. Feels like a gift wrap 2 points right there, right? And Bruins aren't able to convert, aren't aware of the fact that Brant Clark's coming out of the box there. Bad pass, Pasternak has the shot, feeds back. All of a sudden, Clark has a breakaway. Great set of moves by him to beat Allmark, but still, that's just a sequence that can't happen, especially for a team that is so you'd think would be tuned into, sticking to the stronger details of the game and putting games away. That just really can't happen out there for the Bruins in that situation. So even with the positives in this game, like the power play, still not enough to get 2 points out of it. The PK, again, which has probably been one of the most surprising things that, I think since really like the holiday break, the PK has taken a huge step back. This is a group that for years now has been a really, really, foundation, a strong foundation of this team as to why they're so successful is really strong PK work. And it's really just eroded since the holidays. Last 6 games, they're operating at 68.8%. And then even look at this game, right? You have the ozone infraction from Zacha leads to a critical PK late in the game where, again, even if this team's been struggling in shorthanded situations, that is a play that you have to, that is a sequence you have to capitalize on. You have to kill the play. And it just didn't happen for the Bruins in that situation, right? They're able to get the game time goal, go to overtime. And it just, once again compounds the issues with this team as of late where, you can look at some of the positives, right? You look at the third line had a really strong game. You could point to the fact that Pasternak had a goal wiped off of a goalie interference call, which I feel like we could probably talk for about 20 minutes on that as to where exactly that best, where that ruling is there. I didn't really see the need to take that goal off the board, but again, you spin the wheel, right, when it comes to video reviews and stuff like that. But I just think when you look at this team, and also Anthony Marchand gets a goal, good play by him, good play by that fourth line. But regardless of whatever positives you want to put towards a game, and there are some of these games where I think you'll take a strong effort, like the Tampa Bay game, back and forth. You come away with a point there. You'd like more, obviously, but just wasn't the case. But I think you see how that game kind of played out, and you view that as like kind of building your game forward. That's what Montgomery mentioned after that game against Tampa Bay, where it's like, all right, we were pretty much run out of the building in that Calgary game. We beat Vancouver, lose to a Tampa team that's playing really well. You'll take that. To then kind of have a no-show against a team like the Seattle Kraken, who another snoozer of a game, and then a game like the Kings, where again you have some positives, but it's not winning hockey when you can't capitalize in those situations. When you're not aware of when time's expiring on your power play in overtime, where it should be a layup of a opportunity there for you to get 2 points, when you're not killing penalties late in the game, when the team's pushing, all those situations there, I think just make for a really, really rough product out there. And it's, again, some of it has been bad luck. I think you look at like that Kraken game where it felt like the Bruins had 3 or 4 quality chances that either, hit off a crossbar or puck sat like right on the goal line, what have you. And again, that happens over the span of a long season, but it's still a situation, right, where the way this team is playing right now, it's not good enough for a whole 60-minute game to consistently win. And that's the whole thing. This team, as constituted, has the talent, has the goaltending to, fall into quite a few 2-point victories, right? You can rely on a guy like David Pastrnak. You can rely on a guy like Brad Marchand. You can rely on Swayman or Ullmark getting hard at the right time. And that's great and all, but when you're straying so far from your details in so many critical areas of the game and so many other players aren't pulling on the rope, then you do get into this situation where you're staring at a very real possibility where you're playing a pretty good Dallas Stars team on Monday, where you could end this, 7-game homestand with 1 regulation win, which I think would, I think if you're a Bruins fan, you'd be shocked by that, considering how well they'd really had played since the holiday break. But that's kind of the hand they've been dealt, and a lot of it's been self-inflicted in terms of just not executing in critical areas of a game when the momentum can swing back and forth. Whether it's not getting that kill, whether it's not capitalizing on that power play, what have you. The Bruins, mostly have themselves to blame for kind of the situation they're in. So we'll dive into a little bit more of a few of the positives we drew from that game. But before we do that, listen to our good friends over at FanDuel.
Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with things like quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and a whole lot more. Just visit FanDuel.com/Boston and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA.
Once again, shout out to our good friends over at FanDuel. So, in terms of some of the positives, I think the one that you can point to is the third line. You get 2 goals from them. JVR contributes, or you get, JVR gets 2 goals. Frederick gets a goal in the third period. I think on most situations, when you get a third line where you generate 2 5-on-5 goals, most of the time that leads to a victory, right? When you have that part of the lineup really pulling its weight. And it's good to see a few of those guys get going. Frederick had been a little bit quiet since the coming back from the All-Star break. Same with Geeky. I think going into that game, Geeky only had, I think, 1 goal in his last 7 games. So really encouraging to get that part of the lineup going, because it shows you how much different this overall team can be when you have guys further down the lineup who are driving play, can answer the ball and, answer the bell, and can really step up when needed. And even look at like Frederick's goal, which is right after the Kings tied it there in the 3rd period. Perfect example of just the momentum swing of a game and what you need to do to kind of reassert yourself. And I really do like that third line of how they play, Frederick, Geeky, and JVR. I do feel like they complement each other pretty well. And it's one thing where I think the big question mark for that line going into the year in terms of maybe each of them individually is whether or not they were able to drive play amongst themselves, right? Like, is JVR at this stage of his career better suited to be like a top 6 guy where he's with a guy like Pasternak or someone like that? Is Geeky, does he need to be with elevated line mates? Frederick, same thing. And it seems like you put those guys together, just good things tend to happen when they play kind of smart, simplified hockey. They're all 3 big bodies down there. More Geeky, I know he's not really the biggest guy, but 6'2". I think he's 2nd or 3rd on the team in total hits, which again is not the ultimate barometer, but does play kind of a more physical brand of hockey than maybe some Bruins fans expected. So if I'm Jim Montgomery, that's the one line I really don't touch at all moving forward, is that third line. Now, you tell me like the fourth line, I still think you have to figure out what exactly the identity of that group is. I'm not really going to besmirch them that much off of this game, though, when it was good work down low that led to Anthony Richard's goal. He kind of got an assist from the goalie there, but a good finish from him after his linemen's kind of fish out the puck along the end boards. But it's also one of those things where, we've mentioned this time and time again, where if you're the Bruins, you're playing at your best when you've got a lot of other key contributors rolling in the lineup. And, you look at, a guy like Pasternak and what he provides, the usual suspects, but like as good as Frederick and JVR and a few of those guys were tonight, like Jake DeBrusk is still a guy that has 0 points in his last 7 games, when, again, we just see how much more dangerous this team can be when he's really rolling out there as well. So, yeah, you'll take, the fact that the third line's playing well, that you finally got a few power play goals, you can build off of that, but doesn't really feel all that great when you're still, you drop an OT loss to a team and you're now, losers of 5 of your last 6 games. Doesn't feel all that great when at the end of the day, you're trying to build your overall game, trying to get back on track. And this game on Saturday really didn't feel like that at all. So we'll dive into this a little bit more. All right, so the Bruins now close out their homestand on Monday against the Dallas Stars. We are officially, less than a month away from the NHL trade deadline. So what exactly should the Bruins do at this point? And I think overall the game plan should be in the next, 2.5 weeks as you're waiting and assessing your options at the deadline. I don't think this rut the Bruins in changes their overall approach to the deadline in terms of them going from soft buyers to soft sellers, where all of a sudden, like, a guy like DeBrusk is going to get moved for a first-round pick or anything like that. But I do think you look at the way this team is set up in the next 2 weeks or so, wouldn't be surprised they give a younger player like a Fabian Lysell a look, see if just that kind of player can give them a little bit of a spot here, somewhere in the lineup, a little bit more of an offensive pop. Maybe you call up Lowry, but I still feel like the biggest issue with the defense right now is snuffing out scoring chances, and I feel like Lowry isn't necessarily the best fit there for what they really need. So I wouldn't be surprised if they call up a guy like Lysell and give him a little bit of a run here. Worst case, it's kind of like Merkulov, where it doesn't have a lot of minutes, doesn't really impact the game. But if he does well, 1, it raises his trade value. 2, it gives you a little bit of a spark, and you have a guy that maybe you want to keep here long term. And again, worst case, if he doesn't make an impact, you send him back down, and that's that. So, Lysell's had a really strong year, had some early bumps where I think he's continued to kind of learn how to play winning hockey in the NHL ranks. And that's been something that he's had to work on a little bit here, but I wouldn't be surprised if if he gets a look at some point in the next couple of days, weeks, just to give the Bruins a little bit of something here before the trade deadline. So that's something I definitely keep tabs on. And then the deadline, I mean, I still feel like, we've talked about this multiple times on the podcast with both, Evan and Ty, where we've said, is it a middle six player? Is it a fourth line guy? Is it a defenseman? I think the most pressing thing right now is you need another physical, nasty defenseman out there. Derek Forbort, who, again, I think was really strong to start the year, was on the ice for 3 goals against on Saturday against the Kings. Really rough game from him. I just think you need more of a steadying presence further down in that lineup right now. And again, maybe Forbort gets healthy and rights the ship, but I think you need more insurance back there. So, whether that's a guy like Ilya Lyubushkin or Nick Seeler or one of the many kind of third pairing physical defensemen who should be out there, I think the Bruins have to be involved there in terms of picking out one of those players. So I think that's the most pressing need for the Bruins right now is help on D, especially just feels like there's too many, weak chains in their overall armor right now on defense, right? There's a few guys you can trust, a few guys that maybe are underperformed, but you generally know what to expect out of them and you hope that they kind of right the ship. But when you have guys like Forbort who are really struggling, Grzelcyk struggling, there's too many weak areas of that lineup where, we're not even talking about playoffs right yet, but even in this regular season over this kind of gauntlet of an 82-game season, you've got way too many parts of the game where you're like, the Bruins have some soft spots here where a team could really kind of take advantage of them. So I do think looking at that defense has to be their number one priority. And again, I mentioned guys like Lyubushkin or Seeler, but there's so many different guys out there that aren't, we're not talking about the Noah Hannafins or the Chris Tanevs, maybe Jacob Middleton, but that's going to be I think probably a pretty sizable ask for a guy who's probably more of a top 4 guy, a guy that a lot of teams would covet as kind of a physical defenseman, 6'3", under contract for this year and next. Like he's probably going to cost quite a bit, but maybe you weigh that risk reward. But if you're the Bruins and you're able to get out of this deadline with a little bit more heft on the blue line, and then I do think you need some sort of galvanizing kind of fourth line kind of player, like to put into this lineup, just because I think you need more of an identity with that group. That's not to say that you need like a guy who's going to drop the gloves or anything like that, but I think what this team desperately needs is a tone-setting player, a guy that can, answer the bell when needed over a playoff run, can drop the gloves, but can deliver a hit, can get guys going. And so, like, even like a guy like Brendan Duhaime for the Minnesota Wild, who really fast skater, hits pretty much everyone when he hops over the boards. I think a guy like that kind of fits in with like the new NHL in terms of speed, forechecking, that kind of aggressiveness over maybe a bigger guy, but isn't going to win a lot of foot races. I think a guy like Brendan Duhaime is a guy the Bruins should definitely be looking at. So, again, the Bruins are a rough little rut right now. I don't think it's going to change their overall deadline plans or anything like that, but I think it's something that needs to change between now and March 8th. So that's all we have for this episode of Poke the Bear. Hopefully by next week, I'll be able to have my actual voice and I won't be coughing into my microphone every single time. So hopefully this is a one-off. So thank you for your patience grinding through this as I have. But again, you can find all of my stuff over at boston.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Conor Ryan _93. Once again, this is episode 204 of Poke the Bear, and you guys have a great rest of your week.